All right, welcome to Hoops Tonight here at The Volume. Happy Monday, everybody. Hope all of you guys are having a great start to your week. Got a jam-packed show for you today. We're going to do what we usually do on Mondays. I have 5 big questions from the weekend of hoops. And then at the tail end of the show, our weekly power rankings as we go through the top 10 teams in the league. You guys know the drill. Before we get started, subscribe to the Hoops Tonight YouTube channel so you don't miss any more of our videos. Follow me on Twitter at _JasonLT so you guys don't miss show announcements. Don't forget about our podcast feed, wherever you get your podcasts under Hoops Tonight. Don't forget it's also helpful if you leave a rating and a review on that front. We also have brand new social media feeds on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter for the Hoops Tonight channel where we're releasing content throughout the year. Make sure you guys follow us there. And last but not least, keep dropping mailbag questions in the YouTube comments so that we can get to them on our Friday shows throughout the remainder of the season. All right, let's talk some basketball. So first question. Jason, what would you need to see from the Cleveland Cavaliers to take them seriously as contenders? So we're in this weird spot with the Cavs where they had the best record in the league, and their record is not just exceptional, it's above a 70-win pace. So it's like some really special stuff there, right? There's some context. Obviously, the Cavs have played literally the easiest schedule in the NBA to this point in the season. Their opponents have only won, I think, like 46.5% of their games. But even if you quantify that somehow, they're still kicking ass and performing really well against great teams. Started their West Coast road trip with a dominant win over the Cleveland Cavaliers, a game where it's kind of back and forth for the first quarter and a half, and then they just exploded in the second quarter the same way they usually do. Just really, really good defense, getting out in transition. That team is legitimately one of the funnest basketball teams I've ever watched in transition. They remind me of the early Warriors, the way they weaponize that chaos to generate high-quality threes. They're shooting the ball extremely well as a team. They're defending at a super high level. They're playing a very smart brand of basketball. It's awesome. It's beautiful what we're seeing, right? So first and foremost, I do take them seriously as championship contenders. The question is, how seriously? And before we get into that, we got to talk a little bit about NBA history. Since Kevin Durant left the Warriors, in those 5 seasons, there have been 10 teams that finished with a top 2 net rating in the league. So the team that outscored their opponents by the most points per 100 possessions, the top 2, right? They're with those 5 seasons, 2 from each season. Boston in 2022 and in 2024 is the only team out of those 10 teams that actually won their conference, that won 3 playoff rounds, let alone 4. And obviously the 2024 Celtics are the only team that won the title. Point being, we've had 8 teams in the last 5 years who kicked ass all regular season long and then didn't win 3 playoff rounds. So, okay, the question becomes, if it's not just about net rating, what do you look for in those types of teams in terms of ranking them as contenders? Well, first and foremost, I do think it's important to acknowledge that dominating the regular season is an important indicator for championship contention. Yeah, there are a lot of teams who dominated the regular season and still lost, but the fact of the matter is the team that wins is almost always a high net rating team. In fact, you have to go all the way back to the 2011 Dallas Mavericks to find a team that won the title without at least a top 6 net rating. And we all view that Mavs team from 2011 as kind of like a massive upset, right? We view that as like a choke job, if anything, on the part of the Miami Heat. So then the next question becomes, well, we're not just a great team, we're a transcendently great team. We're not just a great net rating team. They're outscoring opponents by like 11 points per 100 possessions. They're a historically dominant team statistically. Well, the Cavs have an opponent win percentage of 46.6%. That's dead last in the NBA. So yeah, they're still dominant, but there's no doubt that the easy schedule has helped them pad their record a little bit. For example, the Phoenix Suns, who are currently sitting at 11th in the Western Conference, have the same number of wins against 500 or better teams as the Cleveland Cavaliers. So like, I look at them as definitely a very, very good regular season team, but like, it's difficult to say just how good yet. They're in the middle of this really tough road trip. They have the 9th toughest remaining schedule, so the chips are going to fall where they may over the course of the 82. What I look at when I start evaluating beyond that first part is, in order to win the title, You got to be a very good regular season team. We just don't have an example in recent NBA history of a team who coasted and chilled and then won the title. It doesn't happen. You have to dominate the regular season. So step 1 for the Cavs, check. What's step 2? For me, in terms of evaluating a team as a playoff threat, I look at what are your weaknesses. The playoffs are about vetting weaknesses. When you have to play 4 rounds against elite teams, inevitably, one of them is going to have the means with which to attack your weaknesses. Let's take Boston, for example. So they had 8 rotation players last year, an 8-man rotation, where every single player was a good shooter, a good passer, like a guy who's good at making reads, a good ball handler, and a good defender. All 8 of them. Some in different ways than others, right? Like maybe Peyton Pritchard could be shot over the top a little bit. Maybe Kristaps Porzingis could be exploited a little bit in space, but as the totality of the lineup, because they were able to put Kristaps on guys who couldn't shoot above the break 3 so that he can run a drop coverage, because Peyton Pritchard was primarily working against bench groups in smaller doses, it just didn't matter. The point is they didn't really have a weakness. They didn't have a weak point you could attack in their defense. They had so much offensive firepower that they could withstand bad games from their stars. They were a good rebounding team. They were a good transition defense. They didn't turn the ball over. So, why did the Celtics win the title? 1, because they attacked the regular season to establish the necessary habits and details, right? But 2, because they were a very well-built basketball team for the playoff setting. We have to look at the Cavs through that type of lens. So, for instance, why did a dominant regular season team like the 2022 Phoenix Suns get upset in the second round? Actually, this to me in recent NBA history is the best corollary for this Cleveland Cavaliers team. Everyone thinks Donovan Mitchell is a star player. I agree. So is Devin Booker. But Devin Booker is not the kind of guy that you would view on the same level as the top guys in the league. Same goes for Donovan Mitchell. Darius Garland, a very, very, very good guard alongside Donovan Mitchell. Same could be said about Chris Paul with that Phoenix Suns group. Having a guy like Mikal Bridges, having a guy like DeAndre Ayton, that was a very talented roster. Cam Johnson too, right? That was a very talented roster, but what happened? They ran into a Luka Doncic-led Mavs team, and they couldn't guard Luka. And CP3 and Devin Booker weren't able to meet with star power to meet the level that Luka was at, and they got upset. So again, it didn't really matter necessarily that they were dominant in the regular season because they had specific weaknesses. Their perimeter defenders couldn't make Luka uncomfortable. Their stars couldn't produce consistently enough to match the level that the stars for Dallas were producing at. As we look at the Cavs in particular, there are 3 main things that I'm concerned about for them in a playoff context. 1 is shooting. Not that they can't shoot, but are they going to shoot this well? They're shooting 2% better from 3 than anyone else in the league. They're shooting damn near 45% on transition threes. I was watching that Nuggets game, that onslaught in that second quarter. It's packing the paint, getting stops, running down in transition. It's another 3 for Darius Garland, another 3 for Sam Merrill, another 3 for Sam Merrill. They're just going in and they're going in and they're going in and they're all going in. 45% on running threes, running up the floor in transition, that's a sky-high number. So I do have a little bit of a concern in the sense that, what happens if they get into a tough playoff series where the shots don't fall at the same level that they've been shooting? 2 is regular season margins. Kenny Atkinson has brought into the Cavs an incredibly smart approach to the regular season. They are incredibly locked in on the details. They're dominating on the margins. They're forcing turnovers. They're getting out in transition. They're sharing the ball more and splitting the load offensively so that you're not becoming heliocentric and predictable. In the half court, they've been the best half court offense in the league this year. They are playing a very, very smart regular season brand of basketball. But because such a huge part of their success is forcing turnovers and getting out in transition, what happens if you do run into a team that has elite ball handling, that takes good care of the basketball, that manages to strangle the pace? And then what if you also have some shooting woes in a situation like that? Then it turns into more of a rock fight, an ugly half-court basketball game. From there, that brings me to my third concern, which is entry points. I still see an opportunity for a good team to get the Cavs into rotation through attacking some of their lesser defenders like Darius Garland and Georges Niang, and so on and so forth. So, again, if I'm talking about winning the title, it's not about beating Indiana in the first round. Cleveland's going to beat whoever it is they face in the first round in all likelihood. But what if you do face Milwaukee in the second round? What if you do face Boston in the conference finals? What if you do have Oklahoma City waiting for you or Dallas waiting for you in the championship round? You have to go through those teams back to back to back. And some of those teams have the ability to attack your specific weaknesses. If I had to do it right now, if I had to rank, I would still keep Boston number 1, OKC and Dallas first. I would have Cleveland kind of like with New York in that 4-5 kind of competition at this point. But I'm not saying they can't do it. I'm just saying we're less than halfway through the season. You've played the easiest schedule in the league. I would like to see more before I finally decide where to place this team in the contenders list when we get closer to the end of the year. And the schedule is getting tougher. We are going to learn more. They're about to play Golden State tonight, turn around and play the Lakers tomorrow. They have to play Dallas, albeit without Luka Doncic. They're going to come home and they're going to have to play Oklahoma City next week. We're going to get more opportunity to learn from this team and see them against some of these matchups and have a little bit better read of what their weaknesses are so that we can make that sort of judgment call when we get there. All I'm saying is you can't take sky-high net rating and really good regular season record to the bank for a championship. Ask the 2021 Utah Jazz. Ask the 2022 Phoenix Suns. There are tons of examples in NBA history of that sort of thing not working. It's just something to keep an eye on as we progress through this season. Again, I am intrigued by Cleveland. I want to see where I could see them being above Oklahoma City and Dallas. I could see that by the end of the season, I view Cleveland as the second best championship favorite behind Boston. I'm just not there yet, and I want to see more. It's the most wonderful time of the year for getting in on all of the hoops, football, and hockey action at DraftKings Sportsbook. In the season of giving, we're being gifted college football and basketball, pro football and basketball, and pro hockey too. Almost 24/7. So many games every day, so many opportunities to place your first bet. Try betting on something simple like picking a team to win. Go to the DraftKings Sportsbook app and place your bet. Current Super Bowl winners on DraftKings right now, the Detroit Lions at plus 260 and the Kansas City Chiefs at plus 425. And here's a gift for all new customers. Bet $5 to get $150 in bonus bets if your bet wins. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code HOOPS. That's HOOPS. That's code HOOPS for new customers to get $150 in bonus bets if your bet wins when you bet just $5. Happy holidays from DraftKings. The crown is yours. Number 2. Jason, what do you make of Jonathan Kuminga's dominant performance against the Phoenix Suns the other night? So this was inevitable, and this is something that happens a lot of times when you're having discussions around a young basketball player. Jonathan Kuminga was great against the Phoenix Suns. He was left on an island a lot against Mason Plumlee and was just hitting really good aggressive moves against him where he was drawing fouls and getting baskets, hit several big jump shots. We talked about the Draymond Green defense on Kevin Durant on that one of those late possessions that forced KD in that really bad miss. Jonathan Kuminga did an awesome job on KD throughout the fourth quarter. Got a couple of strips on him. It was just back pressure, chasing from behind and swiping down at the basketball. Jonathan Kuminga had a really damn good game. And this is what always ends up happening when we have these sorts of discussions. We always look at it through the lens of what just happened and taking a victory lap, or, the other side taking a victory lap if the opposite thing happens, when the reality is we're talking about a big picture issue that extends beyond what just happened. Why do I believe in trading in young talent for useful veteran talent when you're in a win-now circumstance? So stop thinking about these younger teams that are on a championship trajectory. I'm talking about these Lakers and Warriors types of teams where it's your star is in his late 30s and you got to get it done this year. Okay? There's a reason why I'm anti-relying on young players in that situation. Young players come hand in hand with volatility. I am not concerned about whether or not Jonathan Kuminga can drop 30-something points in a game, can be a dominant defensive force down the crunch time of a game, can make play after play to help his team win. I'm not debating whether or not he can. I think Jonathan Kuminga has the potential to be a star in this league. Not a superstar, not a foundational superstar, but I think he can be a top 25, top 20 player in this league within the next 5 to 10 years, 5 to 7 years. I think he can get there. But the difference between this version of Jonathan Kuminga and that version of Jonathan Kuminga, the 27-year-old Jonathan Kuminga, is the 27-year-old Jonathan Kuminga, through pain and suffering of loss, through the joy and the confirmation of wins, through the practice, through the experience, through everything that will happen between now and when he turns 27, we'll figure out how to replicate what works and to cut out what doesn't work for him so that he's more consistent. The issue isn't whether or not Jonathan Kuminga can have a game like he did against the Suns. It's a question of whether or not he will. And the truth of the matter is, this season, when the Warriors have leaned more on Jonathan Kuminga, they have not played as well. Couple of basic stats. When Jonathan Kuminga takes 14 or more shots this year, the Warriors are 4-8. When Jonathan Kuminga plays 27 minutes and 37 seconds or more this year, the Warriors are 4-10. When he plays fewer than 27 minutes and 36 seconds, the Warriors are 12-3. The reason why is when you divert those minutes towards players that have a higher floor, albeit a lower ceiling, there's a more steady production within the confines of what the group is trying to do, and the Warriors are better. Guys, if I thought Jonathan Kuminga would be that guy every game, I would never ask for him to be dealt. But we've seen sometimes 5-6 game stretches where he does it, but he's never been able to sustain that type of impact on both ends of the floor. And the bigger issue is, do you trust Jonathan Kuminga to knock down big jump shots in high leverage situations in the postseason? I don't. Do I trust Jonathan Kuminga to be a functional off-ball defender? Like, we know Jonathan Kuminga can be good on the ball defensively. He's a very bad off-ball defender. Literally just 2 games ago cost them a game, not paying attention in off-ball defense. Like, one mistake in a big spot cost the Warriors a game. And that's okay. Young basketball players make mistakes. I expect an athletic forward in his early 20s to get lost off the ball sometimes. I expect a forward in his early 20s to be hot and cold as a jump shooter. I expect those sorts of things. That's what we've always gotten from young basketball players in this league. And so then the question becomes about the reality of the situation. Will Jonathan Kuminga become the consistent two-way winning force before Steph Curry loses the ability to bring the top-end talent necessary for this team to win? I don't think so. After Steph Curry is gone, is Jonathan Kuminga good enough to be the foundational star to lead you to success in this stacked Western Conference? I tweeted this out the other day. I had a mailbag question where someone was kind of upset about it. But the stats for the offense when Kuminga's on the floor and Steph is off are insane. Pulling it up right now. With Steph Curry on the floor this year and Jonathan Kuminga off, the Warriors have a 121 offensive rating. That's in the 90th percentile. When Jonathan Kuminga is on the floor and Steph is off, the Warriors have a 103.5 offensive rating. That's in the 6th percentile. Jonathan Kuminga is not good enough to be the kind of guy that anchors you as a Western Conference team, like a respectable Western Conference team in the future. He's not that guy. So if he's not good enough to help Steph now, and he's not good enough to really lead to success in the future, and you don't have something else in the hopper that it's not like Pods can become the kind of guy that'll slot Kuminga properly. You don't have that guy. Frankly, you don't have that guy. You do not have a guy in-house that is good enough to lead the next era of Warriors basketball. You do not have it. So the only way you're going to get that is by tanking and taking on as much draft compensation as possible for bad money and being bad for a few years while you try to get yourself an opportunity to bring in a great player. And so the way I look at it, if Jonathan Kuminga is on the roster post-deadline, then you're just hurting both eras. You're hurting this era and you're hurting that era. Now, I had a lot of people talking about, like, well, who are they going to go after? I don't want to lose Jonathan Kuminga for Cam Johnson or for a role player or Nikola Vucevic. I get that. For the record, I said this from the beginning of the season, and I still feel this way. There's no rush. Don't make a deal now. Don't make a deal now unless it's exactly what you want. I've heard that the Warriors are waiting potentially to see if they can get a big name like a Kevin Durant or a LeBron James or a Jimmy Butler. I don't think you're getting those guys, personally, but I'm okay with waiting for it. The problem is if February comes and goes and you don't get KD, Jimmy, or LeBron, but you also don't get something else to help this team on offense, now you're hurting both eras. I know the bottom feels like it's falling out, but like, here's the thing. You're not the 12-3 team that started the season, but you're not the 3-12 team that brought you back to 500 after that either. Things will stabilize. A lot of guys are playing poorly. Buddy Hield's playing poorly. Andrew Wiggins is playing poorly. Dennis Schroeder's playing poorly. Although Dennis Schroeder, by the way, a couple huge plays at the end of that Suns game, that driving layup that he had, and then that huge three that he hit that gave you guys a lead. A couple of big buckets there from Dennis Schroeder. But like, Dennis will play better. Buddy will play better. Andrew Wiggins will play better. Steph will play better. Steph and Draymond are both a little banged up right now. They will be better. You'll stay afloat. Yeah, you might not be above like the 7 or 8 seed when you get to early February, but maybe you will be. And at that point, you can make that call. I'm just saying that you owe it to Steph Curry to turn Jonathan Kuminga and whatever salary filler necessary into a more dependable veteran player that gives them a better chance to win this year. Yeah, that player is not going to have the high ceiling that Jonathan Kuminga does, but his floor is going to be significantly higher, which is going to give you a better chance to win in the short term. Again, the numbers are there, guys. When the Warriors lean a lot on Jonathan Kuminga as a shooter and in a large minutes role, they're not winning. That's just what the numbers are saying. Number 3, Jason, can Kawhi Leonard bring the Los Angeles Clippers to the level necessary to contend for an NBA championship? So they've won 4 of their last 5 games. They beat, albeit with some injury luck, no Luka when they beat Dallas, no Ja when they beat Memphis, no Steph when they beat Golden State. But they've won 4 of their last 5. They're 18-13. James Harden and Norman Powell are averaging 53 points per game over the course of this 5-game span. And now we have reports that Kawhi Leonard is close to returning. And so all these people are asking, what can this team accomplish now that Kawhi Leonard is coming back into the fold? And the answer to me is very simple. If he comes back and he plays like Kawhi Leonard and he can stay healthy for the entirety of a playoff run, then they absolutely can win the title. No question. I believe in this roster. Zubac is a legitimately very good center who is very nice to have for some specific matchups in the Western Conference, guys like Anthony Davis and Nikola Jokic. James Harden is a secondary shot creator. Norman Powell is a tertiary shot creator. Kawhi Leonard, if you get robot Kawhi, if you get 55, 45, 90 Kawhi, then you're absolutely a championship contender. With the perimeter defense and athleticism and hardworking talent on the perimeter that they have, they are a rock-solid team that is built to thrive in the modern NBA. I mean, I talked about the Clippers without Kawhi staying afloat in the standings before the season, simply because I believe in this type of roster build. Give me a floor raiser and James Harden. Give me a pick-and-roll partner that can anchor a defense and Ivica Zubac. And give me a bunch of dudes who fucking guard on the perimeter. We're going to win a lot of basketball games. That's what the Clippers have been doing. Plug Kawhi Leonard into that situation, up the offensive ceiling, you absolutely can go on a run and win 4 playoff rounds. Obviously, the only question is, will he be able to stay healthy? And you guys know how that goes. And we would all be stupid to count on it, but we'd also be stupid to pretend it can't happen either. He's 33 years old. Now that's 33 with a bunch of knee injuries. But if he can put together 6 months here, guys, 6 months. That's all. If he can stay healthy for 6 months, they absolutely have a shot. I think we'd be foolish to count them out. 2 more. Jason, you mentioned during your player rankings that Victor Wembanyama had the potential to jump from your current ranking into the top 10 players by the middle of the season. I know he had a slow start, but in December, it seemed like he had really taken that second-year leap. Would you say that based on what you've seen recently that he's jumped into that top 10 and possibly top 5 players in the world? Thanks for the content. As a diehard Spurs fan, I can't stand that you root so hard for the Lakers, but I appreciate your perspective on the sport and coverage in the NBA. I look forward to your reaction videos after big games. Thank you so much for the kind words. And as I always tell you guys, like as soon as LeBron retires, he's my only like real emotional fanhood attachment. And when that goes, then I won't have any attachment to any team or player in the league. But in the meantime, I appreciate, it's so funny. I had somebody in a mailbag question the other day go like, wasn't even a mailbag question. It was just like a comment. They were like, aren't you an analyst? You're not supposed to be a fan. You're an analyst. And I've always thought that's so funny to me because, like, first of all, I don't necessarily view myself as an analyst. I think it's just a show. This is just the show. And the show is what the show is. The show is the way that I like to talk about basketball. And then secondly, like, I'm a basketball fan. So I am a fan. Why would I sit here and pretend like I'm not a fan? I just am a fan that happens to have a show where I talk about basketball. I've always thought that's interesting. Like, why do I talk about the Lakers? I watch all the Laker games because I'm a big Lakers fan. So, like, obviously, I want to talk about it. Like, it's not really that hard to figure out. You know what I mean? And then what I do is I just put in the extra work to be able to cover the rest of the league. And obviously, I take pride in that work. But like, I also am just. It's weird. I've never felt like a need or a responsibility to not be a fan. I think I have the responsibility to tell you guys I'm a fan and to not sit here and bullshit you to the face and say that I'm not a fan when I obviously am. But I think that's just, I've always been a believer in like just be authentic and just kind of let the chips fall where they may. That's how I've kind of run the show over the years, and I don't intend on changing that anytime soon. Anyway, to your question. So I don't think he's top 5. I think Jokic, Giannis, SGA, Luka, and Jason Tatum are all clearly the top 5. Obviously, Luka's been hurt this year, but when Luka's healthy, we all know that he's in that group. He's definitely in that next tier of guys for me. And, it's one of those things where would I have him right there at 6? Probably not. The reason why is like there are guys that are not going to have the high ceiling that a Victor Wembanyama has. Guys like Anthony Davis, guys like Kevin Durant. There's a bunch of guys kind of in that group. There's a bunch of them. I'm leaving a bunch of names out. The reason why I would have Wemby still behind those guys is there is a difference between like I'm a hyper talented wrecking ball that is just completely filling up the box score, and I'm an incredibly experienced, good basketball player that knows exactly what to do on every single possession to maximize my chances to win. That's the biggest difference between now and where Wemby will be. Will Wemby improve as a shooter? Yeah. Will he improve as a ball handler? Yeah. Will he improve his muscle mass, his defensive instincts, and all these different things? Sure. He's going to get better at all that stuff. But the main thing that's going to drive Victor Wembanyama's success into the future is going to be him understanding how to manage basketball games. What that means is like, hey, like maybe this is not the time to take this jump shot. Maybe this is not the time to go to one of my higher variance sequences. Maybe this is the time to go to one of my lower variance sequences, like something closer to the basket. He's got a whole repertoire of stuff around the basket that he's not even close to unlocking yet. He had a play against Ant in the post in clutch time yesterday against the Timberwolves where he just drop stepped over his right shoulder and was at the rim and just dunked on everybody. Wait till he realizes that if he catches at 5 feet, he can just turn over his left shoulder and shoot a hook shot. And if he can get that hook shot up to 65, 70%, he can have a lack of variance play that he can go to. Or my jump shot's going, I'm leaning on the jump shot, right? Like those are the kinds of things that separate. And so like, it's like, oh, Jason, he's averaging 30, 10, and 5 and 4 blocks a game. Like, how could you possibly say that he's not better than, Jason Tatum or something like that? And again, that's the thing is there's 2 steps to it. It's no different than Giannis, right? Like Giannis early on, it was like, this dude's getting 30 and 12 or 28 and 12 every damn game. This is insane. Like this is one of the best basketball players in the world. And it's like, yeah, but the Giannis from 2019 had no idea how to manage basketball games compared to the Giannis of 2024. The Giannis of 2024 has just so much more command of each possession. That's the big difference. And so, like, again, to me, Wemby's in that 6 to 10 range right now. He's playing at that level, but in order to get to that top 5 range, there's a certain level of just like basketball surgery he's going to have to get better at, and that will come in time and with experience. Last one, I just wanted to give a couple of follow-up thoughts on the Lakers trade yesterday, the trade for Dorian Finney-Smith. I spent a good amount of time last night messing around on the trade machine because now that I wanted to come away from my efforts last night, my wife had a friend of hers that was in town, a childhood friend of hers that was in town, and they ended up hanging out last night. So I had a Sunday night to work, and I literally just watched a bunch of basketball and spent an hour and a half on the trade machine messing around with a bunch of different Lakers stuff. And what I kept coming around to was a simple conundrum. And it's a conundrum that I know a lot of Lakers fans disagree with me about, which is, what do you do next? And is Max Christie good enough to be the 2 guard? Okay. So first of all, start focusing on Max Christie. It's the exact same thing I was talking about earlier with Jonathan Kuminga. I'm not worried about Max Christie's ceiling. I had people in my comments on Twitter going like, Max Christie's playing so well right now. You're right. What happens with young, talented players? Sometimes they play well. Sometimes they don't. He's in a phase right now where he's playing well. You guys saw from earlier in the season what it looks like when he doesn't. And here's the thing. Max Christie against the Cavs on Tuesday night. He might play really well, but I can't really count on him in a game like that. He might also struggle because he's young and he's going to be playing against a really, really good team. Ideally, I want Max Christie as the bench guy in that role. The guy who comes in and guards the best player on the floor with the bench group. Ideally, that's what I want. Then there's this second issue, which is, where does Rui Hachimura fit into all of this? Dorian Finney-Smith, to me, he's got a similar kind of build to Rui, but he's got much better instincts and foot speed on the perimeter as a defender. Meaning defensively, he's better at playing the role of the 3 than a guy like Rui Hachimura is. Now, ideally, I'd love to have Rui too. There's small ball potential. You can imagine a lineup that has Rui, LeBron, and Dorian Finney-Smith all on the floor at the same time, the ability to switch. There's a lot of upside there. But the truth of the matter is Rui's playing 34 minutes a game, guys. And Dorian Finney-Smith more or less plays his position. So it might substantially cut into Rui's minutes. And if it does, what's a better use of Rui's salary? As a bench forward, or call it a starting forward with Dorian coming off the bench, but with those guys splitting minutes, or using his salary as a means with which to upgrade the one weak spot in your starting lineup, which is the 2 guard spot. And that's what I see it as. I want to turn Rui into a guy at the 2 that is a veteran professional defender with experience. And that's why I keep coming around to Bruce Brown. A deal with Toronto centered around Rui and Bruce Brown. They'd have to include a couple of minimum contracts. There would have to be potentially a third team to take on one of the spots for the roster spots for Toronto. There's complications there, but a deal centered around Rui for Bruce Brown turns Rui, which would then become basically a specialist for certain types of situations, with this lineup, we want him next to LeBron and AD, or, with this lineup, or with this matchup, we want Dorian Finney-Smith next to LeBron and AD, and we want Rui coming off the bench or anchoring small ball groups. I think that would be better served as what if we just had a rock solid starting 2 guard? He's the guy who plays 30 minutes a night now. And he's always on the floor with LeBron and AD and with Dorian Finney-Smith. And they can share the floor together. And now I have Austin, Bruce, Dorian, LeBron, AD. Every guy in that lineup is a good defender. Austin's the weakest defender in that lineup, and he's a good defender. Bruce is a legitimate guy who can guard opposing starting guards. Dorian Finney-Smith can guard the second best perimeter player. Austin can guard the third best perimeter player. LeBron and AD on the back line, they'd be elite defensively. Dorian Finney-Smith is a knockdown catch and shoot guy. Bruce Brown is not the best shooter in the world, but he is a very good connective off-ball player. He's like an Alex Caruso. He's a guy who screens really well, cuts really well, offensive rebounds really well. Bruce is really good with transition rim pressure, meaning like he'll get the ball and just attack the rim in transition, kind of like what Josh Hart does for the New York Knicks. I think that lineup is really damn good. So that's the direction I think they should go. Now that opens up a second hole. Okay, Jason, you're losing D'Lo and you're losing Rui, and you're replacing him with Dorian Finney-Smith and Bruce Brown. Where's the offense? And I tend to agree with that. And that's why I would make two separate deals. I put together this deal yesterday. And again, this is obligatory. This is all fantasy land. Trades are very difficult to make. There are a million things that have to line up, including the interests of the Lakers front office to spend first round picks on role players. But all things considered, these are the two deals that I would make. So with the Raptors, it would be Rui, Jalen Hood-Schifino, and Jackson Hayes, because I don't think you would need Jackson Hayes if you got a backup center, which is going to be what the second deal is. Obviously, that's the situation where you would potentially have to do something to clear up roster spots for Toronto, but you'd find a way to figure that out. The second deal would be you call up Utah. And one of the advantages for the Lakers is they already have a first-round pick that Utah owns that is protected. So if they needed to negotiate, they could even further sweeten the pot by just removing protections on a deal like that. But I would trade Gabe Vincent and Jared Vanderbilt for Colin Sexton and Walker Kessler. So in that case, now all of a sudden, I have plenty of ball handling. I've replaced the D'Lo Rui offense issue by bringing in Colin Sexton, a guy that can help run offense for us, right? I've got Colin, I've got Austin, I've got Shake Milton. Those are like my three ball handling guards. But then I've got a slew of perimeter defenders. Max Christie can guard and shoot, right? Dorian Finney-Smith can guard and shoot. Bruce Brown can guard and be a functional offensive player. Cam Reddish, probably outside of the rotation at that point, but that can guard. But then I also have Dalton Connect as a guy that can help on the offensive end. But at the same time, I have the ability to have really good, strong bench groups led by a good center in Walker Kessler, who also can fill in on the nights when Anthony Davis can't play. I can have a group centered around Walker Kessler and LeBron at the 4-5. I can have a group centered around AD and Dorian Finney-Smith at the 4-5 when LeBron's off the floor. I can bring in Christian Wood when I need extra forward depth. There's just a lot of different flexibility there with a lot of good basketball players, plenty of offense. And then just think about this. Austin, Colin, Max, Bruce, Dorian Finney-Smith, LeBron James, Anthony Davis, Cam Reddish. Those are all good defenders. And a bunch of guys with like Bruce and we talked about like resetting the Lakers culture so that they just naturally play harder. Well, having a guy like Bruce, having a guy like Dorian, having Austin, having all those guys that naturally play hard, that does support your natural motor throughout the season as LeBron and AD can ebb and flow with their energy. So again, that's like my, if I had to give you guys my dream scenario, those would be the two deals. And it would probably be like a lightly protected first to Toronto, and then like a lightly protected first and maybe removing the protections on the other pick for Utah. Yeah, you've given up everything. You're all in now, but you're all in with a team that has a lot of really good basketball players around LeBron James, Anthony Davis, and Austin Reeves. Then if it doesn't work out, you blow it up and you trade Anthony Davis and you trade Austin Reeves and you load up on first round draft picks and you go about the process of trying to rebuild from there. But that is the direction that I would look to go. And at a minimum, I think the move here is trying to turn Rui into a guy that you think is a starting caliber experienced player at the 2 that you trust in a playoff setting. All right, guys, let's work through our power rankings and then we'll be out of here for the day. All odds, again, are provided by our partner, DraftKings. So number 10, the Minnesota Timberwolves. They capped off a 3-1 week with a win last night at home against the Spurs. Another really strong defensive performance. Victor hit several tough shots in that game, but I thought Julius Randle really made him work hard. He took 30 shots to get to his 34 points. I thought he did a really nice job defensively there. Gobert made several huge plays down the stretch. Manhandled Victor Wembanyama on an offensive rebound putback. He set a monster off-ball screen that got Dante DiVincenzo open on the left wing for 3. He drew a foul on the offensive glass and made both free throws. His typical excellent defense, switching onto guards and ball screens. He got a big contest as Wemby was coming into a movement 3. I just thought he was really good. And Ant had a bad game where he couldn't really make a shot to save his life, and they got the win anyway. A big one for the Wolves. They're 9-4 in their last 13 games, and all 9 of their wins were against winning teams. They beat the Clippers twice, the Lakers twice, the Warriors, the Spurs twice, the Mavs, and the Rockets They've had a good stretch of health. All of their top 8 rotation players have played in every single game in this stretch. In this span, they're 23rd in offense. Everything is still a chore on that end of the floor. Spacing is terrible. They go through extended stretches every game where the offense just grinds to a halt. A lot of really interesting stuff coming out of the lineup data. Like the bench groups are just consistently playing better. Like staggered bench starter groups that have more shooting are consistently playing better than the starters. When you make basketball easier for your players, like when you make things function on offense by providing them space, they start to believe in what they're doing more, which gets them to defend better. That's the dead giveaway. The starting lineup has their best defensive talent. In 379 minutes, they have a 111 defensive rating. That's not very good. I mean, it's very good, but it's not as good as Minnesota is capable of, right? And it's because they don't believe in what they're doing on offense. When you're getting buckets, you feel good about yourself. You believe more in what you're trying to do on both ends of the floor. You do a better job on defense. The best example of this is their bench group. They have this bench group with Anthony Edwards and Julius Randle, flanked by Dante DiVincenzo, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, and Naz Reid. All 3 good three-point shooters. They have a 122 offensive rating, a 100 defensive rating, 10 points better than the starting group in over 100 minutes this year. That's not a small sample. Plus 22 points per 100 possessions. That is proof of concept of this idea that I've been talking about forever. 2 concepts, right? 1, do we need rim protection if we can defend on the perimeter? No. If you defend on the perimeter well, in that group, Ant, Julius, Dante, and Nickeil Alexander-Walker, they all can guard. You guard on the perimeter, you create an easier job on the back line, and you can defend well even without having rim protection on the floor. And then most importantly, Anthony Edwards and Julius Randle are downhill players. And if you're asking downhill players to play in a crowd, you're making their life more difficult. With those groups, Julius Randle's doing a wonderful job pressuring the rim and spraying out to shooters. Life is easier for everybody, and they look better. As a team, they have been defending really well in this 904 stretch. They're second in defense. They're shutting down the paint. They're second in points per game allowed in that span. They're defending the three-point line well. They're 7th in opponents' threes made. Doing well on the margins, too, like keeping opponents out of fast break situations, keeping them off the offensive glass. Really balanced scoring, too. Ant is only averaging 20.5 points per game in the span. Julius is only averaging 18.2. Like, again, the pace is really low. It's a chore. But they're shooting the three, well enough to kind of make up. Specifically, Julius and Ant are shooting the 3 well enough to try to get some shots in over the top of their poor spacing situations. Dante DiVincenzo is coming on strong. He's shooting 42% from 3 in this span. He's averaging 11 points per game. He had a monster game against the Spurs. He had 26 points and hit 5 threes. But they have an identity. They grind games down to a halt with their defense. They play super slow, and then they rely on Julius Randle and Anthony Edwards' ability to get to their spots, even though they can be inefficient from time to time. I'm still super concerned about this offense in the big picture. But at the very least, they've managed to float in the regular season by recapturing their defensive identity. Right now, the Timberwolves are plus 3,000 to win the NBA title, plus 1,300 to win the Western Conference. Number 9, the Los Angeles Clippers. We talked about them in the earlier segment of the show, so I'm not going to get any further into them right now. If you want to hear more Clippers talk, just go to the full episode. But right now, the Clippers are plus 4,000 to win the title, plus 1,900 to win the Western Conference. Number 8, the Los Angeles Lakers. We also talked about them a lot in the opening segment, so I'm not going to get any further into them right now. But back-to-back wins against the Warriors and Kings. They've now won 6 out of 8. Austin Reeves is hooping his ass off in this stretch. 20 points, 6 rebounds, and 7 assists on 60% true shooting. Just 2.9 turnovers per game. Hit a game winner in the Golden State game. Had the insane passing clinic that he put on against the Sacramento Kings the other night. The Lakers right now plus 3,500 to win the NBA title, plus 1,700 to win the Western Conference. Number 7, the Memphis Grizzlies. 2-2 week. Lost to the Clippers and Thunder. They beat the Pelicans as well as the Raptors. Ja Morant went down with a sprain of his AC joint in the win against the Pelicans on Friday. Really struggled to score during this like massive landslide of a run that Oklahoma City put on them in the second quarter. It was it was just one of those situations where, and Oklahoma City's been doing this to everybody at this point, but like Oklahoma City can really strangle the life out of you. I think they gave up only 19 points in the second quarter during that run. Tough timing for the Grizzlies because their schedule's really tough right now. They're at the Suns next, at the Kings, at the Warriors, home for Dallas and Houston, then at Minnesota, at Houston, at San Antonio, and then home for Minnesota. And as of right now, I tried to dig into it. There's no timetable on Ja Morant's return right now. So hopefully he can come back soon because that schedule's pretty tough. The Grizzlies plus 2,200 to win the title, plus 1,000 to win the Western Conference. Number 6, the Houston Rockets. We're seeing our first little bit of sustained shakiness from the Houston Rockets. After starting 15-6, they are 6-5 in their last 11 games. They've lost 2 in a row. Basically comes down to defensive slippage. Their offense has been bad most of the year, but they only have a 109 defensive rating in this stretch. Ironically, the groups with Amen Thompson in for Dillon Brooks with the starters have a defensive rating over 120. It's pretty weird. The main starting group also has a negative net rating. So this is with Dillon Brooks. So this is with Jalen Green, Fred VanVleet, Dillon Brooks, Jabari Smith, and Şengün. That group has a negative net rating in the last 11 games. Just can't score. They have a 103 offensive rating with that group. There's been a recurring theme, too, in the last couple of games with Houston blowing leads. They blew a 7-point lead with 7 minutes left against Miami, and then they blew a 16-point lead with 5 minutes left against Minnesota. In this 11-game stretch, they've dropped 3 games in clutch situations, scoring just 65 points per 100 possessions on offense in those clutch situations. They've been bad all season in clutch situations on offense, but especially bad as of late. Right now, the Rockets are plus 8,000 to win the NBA title, plus 2,500 to win the Western Conference. Number 5, the Dallas Mavericks. 2-2 week. They beat Portland and Phoenix. They lost to Portland and Minnesota. Really tough defensive game against Portland. Like Kyrie goes off. He had 40-something. Their role players were hitting shots. They just allowed 5 Blazers to score at least 19 points. Didn't get enough stops. But as I said at the time of the Luka injury, I still think this is one of the best rosters in the league, and they still have a lot of talent when Luka is out. Beating the Suns without Luka is a great example of that. They just have a really strong floor every night because they have great rim protection, a variety of different perimeter talent that they could go to depending on the matchup, plenty of ball handling to cover when stars are out. If they can just hang in that 5 to 8 range over this next 4 to 6 weeks while Luka's out, I think they'll be fine. Right now, Dallas plus 1,100 to win the title, plus 550 to win the Western Conference. Number 4, the Boston Celtics, who are very much asleep at the wheel right now. Everything is about them just giving a shit. From what I can tell, you drop a game at home to Chicago and then you get pissed off and go into Chicago and just absolutely dominate them to send a message. You drop a game to Orlando without Tatum, whatever. You lose a weird game to Philly where your game plan that you've been using against everybody, that's been working against everybody, doesn't work because Caleb Martin hit 7 threes. And so then you bounce back by like beating the living shit out of the Indiana Pacers. Again, sending a clear message. But then you let the same Pacers team come in on Sunday and punch you in the mouth. They really got bullied physically in that game. The Celtics have lost 5 out of 9. The defense has been bad. They have a 117 defensive rating in these last 5 games, or in the 5 losses, I should say, over that 9-game stretch. They're not hitting shots. They're just 30% from 3. I would caution against just calling it variance because they're still shooting really well when they're wide open. They're shooting 38% on wide open threes, which is more or less what they've shot all season. It's the moderately contested threes they're not shooting as well on. They were 39% before this stretch, 30% in this 9-game stretch, and that's been the big difference. Derek White had some interesting comments after the Pacers loss about how this has been the hardest stretch that he's played on since he came over to the Celtics. And like, I'm going to go positive here. I think that adversity is good. I think it's good to get punched in the mouth every once in a while, especially when you're so good that you're kicking everybody's butt and you start to get a little bit full of yourself, right? Humility is a good thing in that regard. And adversity, in my opinion, has always brought out the best in basketball players. So frankly, like, I'm kind of excited to see Boston face some more adversity this year. Not just in the regular season, they're going to face better playoff teams this year. And I'm just curious to see how they respond. I expect a positive response. That's why I'm still picking them to win the title. But I thought Derek White's comments were interesting because that's really the thing that we're going to be keeping an eye on moving forward, how they handle their first real stretch of adversity in the last couple of years. Number 3, the New York Knicks, 4-0 week. They beat the Raptors, the Spurs, the Magic, and the Wizards. The Wizards put a little bit of a scare into them on Saturday night. Justin Champagnie hit 1,000,000 threes, and Jalen Brunson just pulled them back from the brink with an offensive masterclass. He scored or assisted on every single bucket in the final 6 minutes of regulation. He hit Bilal Coulibaly with this nasty hesitation move to hit a floater that sent the game to OT. Then he scored 9 more points in overtime, and they put the Wizards away. Brunson finished with 55 points and 9 assists on 31 shots with only 3 turnovers. That's preposterously high usage to not have a single turnover. To only have 3 turnovers. Jalen Brunson's done a really nice job all year of feeling out when the team needs him to do everything on offense versus when they need him to just take a step back. They're 8-1 this year when he scores 20 or fewer points, but they're also 5-1 when he scores 35 or more. I thought that was a really interesting stat to demonstrate that like touch from Brunson in terms of like understanding when to like really put his imprint on the game versus to play more as a cog in a system. Since November 15th, the Knicks are 17-4. It's the second best record in the league. Oklahoma City 16-13, but they're technically 16-14 because they lost an in-season tournament game. The Knicks are second in offense in that span, 14th in defense, third in net rating, sixth in rebounding, doing some more damage on the offensive glass too, looking more like last year's team. 65th in assist percentage. Remember, this team last year was 59% in assist percentage, which ranked second to last in the entire league. So a lot more equal opportunity offense. The formula is coming together. They're really defending on the perimeter and using it as a weapon to get out in transition. They're sixth in points off of turnovers in this span and fifth in fast break points. They're also playing really good drive and kick ball, getting a lot of really good use out of their offensive talent. And then Brunson is able to provide that apex shot creation that they need when things bog down. They are battling on the offensive glass again, capturing some of that identity from last year. The Knicks right now plus 850 to win the NBA title, plus 390 to win the conference. Number 2, the Oklahoma City Thunder. They're going through an absolutely dominant stretch of defense. They've held 6 of their last 7 opponents to 106 points or fewer. 4 of their last 7 opponents to fewer than 100 points. Their offense has still been super up and down, but they've been winning even when they don't shoot well because of the strength of their defense. And then when they shoot well, they just beat the hell out of you. That's really the thing. When Oklahoma City makes shots, you lose by 25, 30 points. Since the in-season tournament loss to Milwaukee, since that tournament loss doesn't technically count in the regular season, the Thunder have won 11 in a row and 15 out of 16. The offense is getting better. They're 7th in that 16-game span. Obviously, the clunker against Milwaukee notwithstanding. By far the best defense in the league over that span. They're 4 points better than the second-place Clippers. Shea has been gaining ground on the MVP race and very well might be the leader right now. He's averaging 33 points, 6 rebounds, and 6 assists on 65% true shooting with just 2.7 turnovers per game. He's playing some super special basketball right now. Isaiah Hartenstein's been great, 13, 13, and 4 assists with a 2-to-1 assist-to-turnover ratio. The Thunder are kicking ass. If you believe in them right now, they're plus 300 to win the NBA title, plus 150 to win the conference. And the Cavs, we're not going to go too deep into them. They're 2-0 this week, beat the Jazz and beat the Nuggets. We talked about them in the top of today's show. So make sure you get over to the full episode for that. The Cavs right now, plus 1,600 to win the NBA title, plus 550 to win the Western Conference. All odds provided by our partner DraftKings. Again, guys, that's all I have for today. We're taking there's a chance. It depends on how some stuff go. I have some family in town, so it depends on how that goes. But if things break right, I might do an episode tonight after Cavs Warriors. I'll let you guys know. If not, we're taking Tuesday and Wednesday off for the holiday, and I'll be back Thursday. I will see you guys then.